The Midnight Discovery. The ancient texts section of Stirling Public Library had always felt different after dark. Raven Wells knew this better than anyone, having worked the night shift for 3 years. The towering shelves of leather-bound volumes seemed to whisper their secrets in the dim fluorescent light, but tonight those whispers had turned into something else entirely. Raven first noticed it while reshelving a cart of medieval manuscripts, a soft blue glow emanating from between the stacks. She assumed it was someone's forgotten phone or tablet, though the library had been closed for hours. As she approached, the light pulsed like a heartbeat, casting strange shadows across the worn wooden floor. "Hello?" she called out, her voice barely above a whisper. "The library's closed." The glow intensified, and the air began to ripple like heat waves rising from summer pavement. The temperature dropped sharply, causing her breath to fog in front of her face. Books began to vibrate on their shelves, their pages rustling without wind. That's when she saw it, a tear in the air itself, like reality had been unzipped. Through the opening, she glimpsed impossible geometries and swirling colors that her mind struggled to process. Her first instinct was to run, to call security or the police, but something held her in place. Maybe it was curiosity, or perhaps something more, a sense that this moment was meant for her. From the tear emerged a figure, tall and graceful, with skin that seemed to shift between deep purple and midnight blue. The being wore what appeared to be liquid starlight, draped across its form in impossible patterns. Its eyes held the depth of cosmos, and when it moved, it left trailing echoes of itself in the air. The being spoke, its voice resonating directly in Raven's mind. "Your collection, it still holds the old knowledge. We thought it all lost." Raven gripped the edge of a nearby shelf to steady herself. What are you?" "I am called Nthera, though your tongue would struggle with its true pronunciation. I am a keeper of records from what you would call the Andromeda Galaxy." The being's form shifted slightly, adapting to Earth's atmosphere. "We have been searching for traces of the ancient archive for millennia." Raven's academic curiosity began to override her fear. As a librarian with a doctorate in ancient languages, she couldn't help but be intrigued. "Ancient archive? Before your species learned to write, there was a vast network of knowledge spanning galaxies. Earth was once a crucial node in this network. But something happened, a great catastrophe that severed the connections. We believed all traces were lost, until we detected an energy signature from this building." The being glided toward the restricted section, where the library's oldest texts were kept. Its presence caused the security systems to flicker and die. "These books," Nthera said, gesturing to a particular shelf, "they contain echoes of the old frequencies. Hidden in their margins, encoded in their bindings." Raven followed, her mind racing. She had always sensed something special about these books, the way they seemed to hum with their own energy. Why now? Why come looking after all this time? Nthera's form darkened, like a cloud passing over stars. "Because the severing is happening again, child. Across the cosmos, knowledge is being systematically destroyed. We believe Earth may hold the key to preventing another dark age." Moving to a specific volume, Nthera's fingers traced the spine of an ancient text Raven had never been able to translate. Symbols began to glow beneath the being's touch, forming patterns that seemed to move of their own accord. "Will you help us, Raven Wells? Will you join us in preventing the loss of all that was and all that could be?" The question hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Raven looked at the glowing text, then at her beloved library, a place she had always known held more mysteries than anyone suspected. She thought of all the nights spent wondering if there was something more to life than cataloging other people's stories. "What exactly would helping you entail?" she asked, her voice stronger now. Nthera's form brightened slightly. "We must decode what remains of the archive here, and quickly. Those who wish to destroy knowledge are not far behind me. But be warned, accepting this task will change everything you believe about your world, your history, and your own capabilities. Outside, a distant siren wailed, and the library's emergency lights began to pulse. Nthara's form flickered. We have little time. Already they move to contain what they cannot understand. Choose quickly, librarian. Raven looked at the book in front of her, its symbols still dancing with otherworldly light. Everything she knew about reality had been appended in the span of minutes, yet somehow this felt right. Like every late night spent among these books had been preparing her for this moment. Whispers between worlds. Nthara's teachings began immediately. The alien being's fingers traced glowing patterns in the air, creating complex mathematical equations that seemed to hover between them. As Raven watched, ancient symbols from the book began to align with these equations, revealing previously invisible connections. The archive was not merely information, Nthara explained. It was a network of consciousness itself, binding species across space and time. The library's security systems continued to flicker erratically. Through the windows, Raven noticed unusual patterns of light in the sky, too geometric to be natural, too precise to be coincidence. Nthara noticed her distraction. The Seekers, the alien said grimly. They track disturbances in reality. We must work quickly. Together, they began decoding the hidden messages in the ancient texts. Raven's expertise in dead languages proved unexpectedly useful. Patterns she had noticed over years of study suddenly took on new meaning. The margins of these books contained more than scholarly notes, they held keys to understanding the fundamental nature of consciousness itself. As they worked, Nthara shared more about the impending crisis. The severing isn't natural. There are those who believe knowledge should be controlled, contained. They fear the power of unfettered consciousness. Who are they? Raven asked, carefully copying down a series of symbols that seemed to pulse with their own inner light. We call them the Silence. They move between worlds, destroying connections, erasing memories. They believe they're preventing chaos, but they're actually unraveling the fabric of reality itself. A deep rumble shook the building. Books tumbled from their shelves as dust rained from the ceiling. Nthara's form flickered like a failing hologram. They're trying to close the breach, the alien said urgently. We don't have much time. Raven felt a sudden pressure in her mind, like the onset of a migraine. Images flooded her consciousness, vast libraries floating in space, crystalline structures containing the collective knowledge of civilizations, and something darker, shadows moving between stars, leaving silence in their wake. The knowledge in these books, she gasped, it's alive somehow, isn't it? All knowledge is alive, Nthara confirmed. Consciousness and information are two aspects of the same fundamental force. Your species once understood this. The ancient archive wasn't just a collection of facts, it was a living network of minds spanning galaxies. The pressure in Raven's head intensified. She could feel the books around them resonating, responding to Nthara's presence. The hidden symbols were becoming clearer, as if her mind was learning to see in a new spectrum. But why here? She managed to ask. Why this library? Places of learning develop their own consciousness over time. Your years of dedication, your love of knowledge, it created a beacon we could follow. But now that same beacon will lead the Silence straight to us. Another tremor shook the building, stronger this time. Through the windows, Raven saw black vehicles converging on the library, their headlights cutting through the darkness. Government? She asked. Some of them, Nthara replied. But not all. The Silence has agents everywhere, in every institution. They're drawn to concentrations of knowledge like moths to flame, only they come to extinguish the light, not embrace it. Raven made a decision. Moving quickly, she began gathering specific volumes, choosing them by instinct as much as understanding. We need to move these somewhere safe. If they're as important as you say dash. They'll find them, Nthara interrupted. Unless. The alien's form shimmered thoughtfully. There might be another way. The knowledge could be preserved inside a living mind. What do you mean? Your species has more capacity than you know. The ancient archive wasn't stored in books or computers, it was stored in consciousness itself. With the proper preparation, you could. The building shook again. Outside, voices shouted commands. The sound of boots on stairs echoed through the building. There's no time to explain fully, Thera said. But I can show you. It will be dangerous. Your mind will have to expand beyond its normal limits. Are you willing? Raven looked at the books in her arms, then at the stairs where flashlight beams were already visible. She thought of all the knowledge that could be lost, all the connections that might be severed forever. Show me, she said. Nthera's form began to glow intensely, tendrils of light reaching out toward Raven's temples. Remember, the alien said softly, once begun, this cannot be undone. You will become part of the archive itself. The hidden knowledge. As Nthera's light merged with Raven's consciousness, ancient knowledge flooded her mind. Millennia of history, science, and wisdom from countless civilizations poured through her synapses like liquid fire. She saw Earth's true history, not just human civilization, but the countless species that had visited, studied, and contributed to the archive before humanity's emergence. The security forces were closing in, their footsteps echoing through the library's marble halls. But Raven barely noticed. Her mind was expanding, learning to process information in entirely new ways. The symbols in the books now spoke to her directly, revealing layers of meaning that had always been there, hidden in plain sight. The archive is accepting you, Nthera observed, maintaining the connection. But we must complete the transfer before dash. The library doors burst open. Men in black tactical gear flooded in, led by a figure different from the others. While the tactical team moved like trained soldiers, this figure moved like smoke, its edges seeming to blur. Step away from the human, the figure commanded, its voice carrying unnatural harmonics. This node must be silenced. Nthera's form brightened defensively. You're too late. The connection has already begun. Raven felt knowledge continuing to pour into her mind. She understood now why the silence feared this so much. The archive wasn't just information, it was a key to unlocking humanity's full potential. The ability to share consciousness across space and time, to tap into the collective wisdom of the cosmos. The shadowy figure raised its hand, and reality began to warp around them. Books flew from their shelves as gravity fluctuated. The tactical team took up positions, their weapons trained on both Nthera and Raven. But Raven was changing. The knowledge flowing into her mind wasn't just information, it was transforming her consciousness itself. She could feel the library around her, not just as a building, but as a nexus of knowledge. Every book, every word, every thought ever conceived within these walls became part of her awareness. You cannot stop this, Nthera declared. The archive lives again. The shadow being launched an attack, not physical, but a wave of null energy designed to erase information patterns. Raven felt it coming and, drawing on her new understanding, raised a shield of pure thought. The attack dissipated against it like smoke against glass. Impossible, the shadow hissed. A human mind cannot dash. You never understood us, Raven interrupted, her voice resonating with new power. Humans don't just store knowledge, we transform it. We take information and create something new. That's what you really fear. The tactical team began to lower their weapons, confusion evident in their postures. The knowledge flowing through Raven was affecting them too, awakening long-dormant neural patterns. Humanity's capacity for understanding had never been lost, merely dormant. Nthera's form pulsed with approval. The archive chose well. You're not just receiving the knowledge, you're evolving it. The shadow being launched another attack, more desperate this time. But Raven wasn't just defending anymore. Drawing on the archive's wisdom, she began to push back. Light erupted from her hands, not just illuminating the physical space but the higher dimensions where information itself existed. "I see you now," she said to the shadow. "You're not destroying knowledge, you're hoarding it. Keeping it for yourselves while claiming to protect others from it." The shadow's form began to unravel as its true nature was exposed. The tactical team members blinked, their minds clearing as ancient mental blocks began to dissolve. But victory came with a price. Raven could feel the knowledge burning through her neural pathways, transforming her brain to accommodate information patterns it was never designed to hold. She was becoming something new, neither fully human nor purely archive, but a bridge between worlds. "The transformation is nearly complete," Thera said softly. "But you must choose, you can still step back from this precipice." Raven looked at the books around her, at the shadow being's dissipating form, at the awakening humans nearby. She thought of all the knowledge that had been hidden, all the connections that had been severed. "No," she said firmly. "Knowledge belongs to everyone. And I'm going to make sure it stays that way." The light within her grew brighter, and the library's walls began to hum with resonant energy. The archive wasn't just being preserved, it was being reborn. The library had become a nexus of awakening. As Raven's transformation continued, the archive's influence spread outward. People across the city began remembering things they'd never known they'd forgotten. Ancient languages suddenly made sense. Scientific breakthroughs that had been mysteriously stalled for decades started flowing again. But the silence wasn't finished. More shadow beings emerged from between realities, drawn to the surge of awakening knowledge. Nthera's form brightened in alarm. "They're calling reinforcements. The silence will not allow a new archive node to establish itself without a fight." Raven, now glowing with internal light, accessed the archive's tactical knowledge. "Then we don't stay here. The library served its purpose, but now we need to move." She reached out with her expanded consciousness, searching for other places of concentrated knowledge. Universities, museums, research centers, each one a potential amplification point for the archive's restoration. The tactical team that had initially stormed the library now stood with them, their minds freed from artificial constraints. Their commander, a woman named Lieutenant Reeves, stepped forward. "We were briefed that this was a national security threat," she said. "But I remember now. My grandmother used to tell stories about the Star People, about the great library in the sky. We thought they were just tales." "Stories often carry truth," Thera observed. "Your species preserved what it could not consciously remember." More vehicles were converging on the library. Satellites above repositioned themselves, targeting the building with unknown energies. Raven could sense them all now, could see the webs of control the silence had woven through human civilization. "We have 19 minutes before their primary containment team arrives," she announced, the knowledge flowing naturally from the archive. "We need to reach the quantum physics lab at Metropolitan University. There's equipment there we can use to amplify the archive signal." Lieutenant Reeves nodded sharply. "My team will get you there." The shadow beings attacked again, this time coordinating their null energy waves. Raven and Thera created a joint shield, their combined consciousness forming patterns that hadn't existed in this reality for millennia. They moved quickly through the city, a convoy of military vehicles now protecting rather than pursuing them. Raven used her new awareness to guide them through paths of least surveillance, avoiding the silence's watching eyes. But with each passing moment, more of Earth's population began to wake up. Scientists looked at their research with new understanding. Linguists suddenly comprehended languages they'd never studied. The archive wasn't just sharing information, it was restoring humanity's severed connection to its own potential. "They're trying to shut down the power grid," Lieutenant Reeves reported as they approached the university. "Orders coming from the highest levels." "Let them," Raven said calmly. "The archive doesn't need electricity." It never did. They reached the physics lab just as the city's lights began to fail. But in the darkness, Raven glowed brighter, the archive's energy flowing through her. Nthera helped her connect with the lab's quantum equipment, creating a resonance chamber that would amplify the awakening. The silence launched its final assault. Reality itself buckled as they tried to create a null zone around the entire university. But they hadn't counted on one thing: humanity's inherent resistance to having its consciousness constrained. As the shadow beings pressed their attack, people across the globe began to push back. The archive's knowledge, flowing through countless awakened minds, became a shield that no amount of null energy could penetrate. The final phase was about to begin. Raven positioned herself in the center of the quantum chamber, with Nthera maintaining the dimensional breach that would allow full restoration of the archive. "Ready?" the alien asked. Raven nodded, her human form now barely containing the energy within. "Ready to remind humanity who we really are." The quantum chamber hummed with impossible energies as the archive's full restoration began. Through Raven's transformed consciousness, knowledge that had been locked away for millennia began flooding back into Earth's noosphere. Nthera maintained the dimensional breach while Lieutenant Reeves' team defended against the last desperate attacks of the Silence. But something unexpected happened. As the archive reconnected with humanity's collective consciousness, it began evolving into something new. The ancient knowledge wasn't just being restored, it was synthesizing with human creativity and innovation, creating patterns that had never existed before. "This is unprecedented," Nthera observed, their form flickering with excitement. "Your species isn't just receiving the archive, you're enhancing it." Raven, now more energy than flesh, understood. Humans had always been more than just receivers of knowledge. They were transformers, creators, innovators. The archive wasn't meant to be merely restored, it was meant to be reborn. The Silence launched their final assault, a desperate attempt to null not just knowledge but consciousness itself. But they encountered something they had never faced before: human imagination combined with cosmic wisdom. Every attempt to erase was met with creation. Every void they created was filled with new possibilities. Lieutenant Reeves and her team watched in awe as reality itself seemed to reshape around them. The quantum chamber had become a nexus of creation, where human consciousness met universal knowledge in a dance of infinite possibility. "It's time for the final integration," Raven announced, her voice resonating across multiple dimensions. "But this isn't just about restoring what was lost. It's about creating something new." She reached out, not just with her transformed consciousness but with her humanity intact, and made her choice. The archive wouldn't be hidden away in secret places anymore. It would become part of human consciousness itself, accessible to all who sought to learn, to understand, to create. The Silence's forms began to dissolve, not destroyed but transformed by contact with this new kind of consciousness. Their fear of chaos, of uncontrolled knowledge, melted away in the face of human wisdom combined with cosmic understanding. As the transformation completed, Raven remained herself while becoming something more, a bridge between what humanity had been and what it could become. Nthera, their mission accomplished in ways they had never imagined, prepared to return to their own dimension. "What you've created here," the alien said, "will echo across galaxies. You haven't just restored the archive, you've evolved it." Raven, glowing with inner light but still recognizably human, smiled. "Knowledge was never meant to be static. Change is what we do best." The quantum chamber powered down, but the changes it had helped create rippled outward, unstoppable now. Humanity had taken its first steps into a new age of understanding, not just of the cosmos, but of themselves. And in the Sterling Public Library, where it all began, the books continued to whisper their secrets, no longer hidden, but part of humanity's growing symphony of knowledge.